Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this evening's live stream. We have a special guest joining us this evening, who I will introduce straight away. Won't need introduction. But welcome to Phil, our deputy leader. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Good evening.
We've got lots to talk about. As they do, fire the comments in. We'll try and have a look at those as well. So, where shall we start tonight? Let's start with this. In fact, I've got it in my I've got a little picture over here, I think. Right, there it is. Right, this is a letter from our MSP, where we live, Daniel Johnson, MSP. He's a Labour MSP, and he's written to my son, wishing him a happy 18th birthday. Isn't that nice? Isn't that how considerate of a local MSP to take the time to write a letter to my son on his 18th birthday? I remember my older son had one of these as well when he was 18. Now, there's no mention of it about a political party. So they would claim this is all about encouraging political engagement. Well, anyway, let's have a look at what Daniel Johnson had to say. I wanted to drop you a line, very personal, isn't it? To introduce myself as your member of the Scottish Parliament, say massive congratulations on your 18th birthday. I hope you have an amazing day, and I wish you all the best. Copy and paste, standard letter. 18 is a significant milestone in your life. You start to think about what life as an adult might look like, whether that's continue with education, looking for full-time employment, training program, or taking that trip to explore a new culture or country. I hope that you take some time to think about the issues that are important to you. See, he doesn't want to guide them. He's just saying, what's important to you? That's what counts. It's not what I think. It's what you think, 18-year-old person. Whether it's climate change, education, human rights, and international aid, to name just a few. In other words, it's what issues you might be interested in. But here's a few hints, by the way. This is what you think you'll probably be interested in. It's never been more important for young people to make sure their voice is heard loud and clear. I never really buy this. This is the most important election ever. It's never been more important than now for young people to make their voices heard. Anyway, so you have the opportunity to influence not just your own future, but the future of your country. And I'd be delighted to hear from you about any thoughts you may have on any issues. Well, two problems with this, basically. First of all, this is politicians ingratiating themselves with voters at taxpayers' expense. They would say, oh, it's not political. It doesn't mention the Labour Party, but it's, hi, I'm Daniel. I'm your local, and I'm interested in what you think. That is obviously a positive. It encourages support for the MSP. And then where it says, the issues that are important to you, whether it's climate change, education, human rights, international aid. So just that suggesting, as a young person, this is probably what you should be thinking of the important things. So, totally out of order, and they should be scrapped. I would tend to think, so that's what the royal family is for. If someone wants to send a nice letter to people on their 18th birthday, then that could be for the royal family. Then it's not political. But I don't think any politician can write a letter like that without it being having political influence. So I think it's out of order. What say you, Phil?
I'm not so sure for me that I'd say it's totally out of order. I think a member of parliament is there to represent the constituency or an MSP. If is it the constituency MSP that's doing it, or is it a regional list? Yeah. So I think the constituency person has a bit of a right to connect to people in the constituency, and if they do it only once when the person's 18, presumably it should be 16 if it's 16 that people get to vote at, then it's just introducing them to the electoral system and saying, by the way, over your life you're going to have an MSP that represents your constituency. You're free to get in touch with them about anything. I think that's okay to do that. I mean, obviously he's put the issues that he thinks they should care about. It's not put a fair representation of issues, but I'm not against somebody getting a letter once in their lifetime when they enter into having the ability to vote. But maybe it's something that should be done by a neutral body.
I think it should be done by, I don't know, some government department. So it should be completely non-political, and they will claim it is. But I think if you're the person, hi, I'm, what's his name again? Daniel Johnson. then that's lodging your name in their mind. I mean, if I was an MSP, I'd be thinking, right, this is a smart move. I want to get elected next time. I'm very happy that I'm doing this. That this is a good thing for me. So it needs to be completely neutral, in my view. Anyway, that's interesting. As an aside to this, actually, I met someone the other week now, who was or had been a member of the Scottish Youth Parliament, and that was quite an experience as well. That person had some very interesting tales to tell. I'd like to hear some more of them one day. But the Scottish Youth Parliament is just used to the young people are used to articulate the views of the political establishment, as then they can say they're listening to them. But
and what was their rough take on being a part of the Scottish Youth Parliament? Is there much you can share, or not much you can say without?
They said that they were quite isolated.
Yeah.
In it, and that it was very strongly guided by the adults.
Yeah.
There's a big element of groupthink in it, which is exactly what the government wants. Yeah. Now, maybe we'll get some more of that story.
How do you get into the Scottish Youth Parliament?
You get elected.
Yeah.
So you stand for you can't stand for a political party.
Yeah.
But I think you write a paragraph or two, and then the voting, your paragraph or two, maybe your photograph. I don't know. I mean, does everyone at school get to vote in it? I don't know how they do it, because the youth parliament comes up to age 25. So I've never been aware of anyone voting. When I was teaching, I was never aware of anyone voting for it. So I don't know who the electorate is. I'm not quite sure. Yeah, don't know. But people are voting in the children's parliament. I'm not sure how they get in, but there's no elections to the children's parliament.
Okay.
And that is just abusing children to promote the government's ideology. It really is dreadful. And both the youth parliament and the children's parliament, I think I'm right in saying, one of them, our friend Colin Break Down the Barrier Between Childhood and Sexuality Morrison, behind the RSHP.Scot resources, he was involved in one of them. I think he was involved in the children's parliament, and involved in the youth parliament was Jordan Linden. Have I got that name right? Who was a councillor, an SNP councillor in, I think it was South Lanarkshire. But it came out that there were inappropriate goings on, including in his work with the young people at the youth parliament.
Yeah.
Involved in who was staying in which hotel rooms, etc., this sort of thing. So he's resigned as the leader of, I think it was South Lanarkshire Council. Yeah, but he was a key figure in the youth parliament. I mean, it's business as usual. Business as usual. Right. Good evening. Let's see the comments coming in. Right. Let's see what else we've got. Right. I've been mentioning this for a little while. 2 nights' time. If you're in Edinburgh, this is not a family party thing, but it's a gathering for Christians who are involved in politics, pro-life movement, campaigning on some moral, social issues. Sometimes people like that feel like maybe a bit isolated, or people maybe don't get them in the church they normally go to. So this is bringing together like-minded people with a similar calling, similar vision, to hear each other's stories and to encourage each other. That's basically what it's about. Phil's taking part in that. Phil, do you want to give a sneak preview?
Yeah, so actually I wrote a document that I was going to be handing out at the Scottish Family Party conference, but sadly it didn't get printed on time. And it's called "Why is Abortion So Evil?" And it comes out of talking to people, perhaps in churches and on the street, and coming away with the feeling that people kind of thought that abortion was basically, significantly lesser than killing any other life. So lots of arguments, that people would use would leave you thinking that this is, basically not as important as taking somebody else. And the more I thought about it on lots of different axes, I thought that actually it's more significant and more grievous. And this article just goes through those different things, and so I'm going to be speaking on that at Convocation, and just and that you'll be able to pick up that kind of document there as well. We got 500 printed, so it's a good thing to come and have a listen to, and take away and see if you can use.
Yeah, we've got someone else telling their story as well. So yeah, if you're in Edinburgh, come along, or even if you're not in Edinburgh, come on. I'm sure you'd find it helpful. I say even if you're not a Christian, if church is not really your thing, I'd still say come along, and it'd be great to see you. Anyway, so that's something new in a couple of days. Right, we talked about that. Right, this was well, so they've just settled on this issue a little bit, but there's still a couple of things to say. I've got a couple of things to show you about it as well. Did you see Jaguar's new advert, Phil?
I've seen the fallout from it. I don't think I've actually seen the whole advert. I've seen tiny clips from it and things like that of lots of people wearing very flamboyant clothing and a logo that doesn't look very sophisticated for what's meant to be a premium car. Yeah.
I would say the logo and the text or whatever. I'm still not very interested in that, but the video. I mean, for a start, it was totally irrelevant to a car manufacturer. That's one side. That's just it's been a bad advert. The real issue I want to talk about is it's really like gender bending. You can't tell if it's a man or a woman. It's just deliberately like men dressed up as women, etc. Just trying to be confusing and androgynous, which I think is a really dangerous trend. And for a car company to jump on that and assume that they weren't going to get a massive backlash, it's just absolutely clueless. So I thought it was really bad. So they said, copy nothing. So yeah, that's me on Twitter. I said, well, we certainly won't be copying this. That is for sure. So they've had enormous flack for it. The management have doubled down. It will do huge harm to them. But Jaguar are in trouble in any case, because the government said you're only going to be able to sell electric cars in 2035, whatever. So Jaguar, a relatively small company, said, well, we can't make everything. Okay, so we've got to choose to go electric. We've got to plan ahead. That's what they're doing. And now that that's getting towards coming to fruition, the electric car market's collapsed. And I'm not sure they're going to be able to stick to these deadlines to ban the sale of petrol and diesel and hybrid cars in 2035. So if the government extends the deadline, I think one of the casualties might be Jaguar, because they just can't. They constantly say, oh, right, okay, we're going to stop making petrol and diesel cars again. So they're potentially in big trouble before they started shooting themselves in the foot with their adverts. Anyway, there's some funny things on the internet. These are all AI generated, but I thought they were quite amusing. So on the basis of the advert, someone asked AI to create some images of what they think the new Jaguar model range will look like. So, yeah, could be a bit like that. That would fit in. That's the sort of car that the advert conjures up. That as well. So that was a bit of fun, and also very good. I thought someone made a video. Again, I don't know if this is AI. It might be cruder than that, but someone said actually they could turn this whole thing around. Jaguar could turn this whole thing around by just producing a video like the one I'm about to show you, as though the first one was a bit of a joke, and it was setting it up for this one. So. Problem solved. They could just put that out next week, and the whole thing is washed away. Everyone think it was a brilliant joke, and all would be well. Now, people have also been commenting in contrast. I assume this wasn't planned. This was just coincidental. Volvo put out an advert as well, and the person here is described as the most pro-family, pro-life car ad of all time. Again, not much to do with cars. It did actually have some cars in it. But it was about a couple. They find out that she's pregnant. They have the child's little girl, and it goes through her growing up. And there's a sort of heartwarming family tale. Total contrast to the Jaguar, sort of gender bending. Now, totally the other end from the pro-family. Man and woman fall in love, get married, have kids. The Jaguar one was like, no, we're as far away from that as we possibly can. We can't even tell who's a man and a woman, let alone any sort of traditional setup like that. So well done, Volvo. We'll give them their endorsement this week. Okay, what else has been going on? I put this video on YouTube. This was from my lecture. It was back in March. Humza and Man the Myth the Muslim. I thought the evening was really good. We had it wasn't a huge room, but it was chock-a-block, a Woodside halls. Quite a lot of interest in that. I filmed it on a phone because the plan was to take this lecture around the cities of Scotland, but then Humza went and resigned. So we were going to film it properly at a later event. But Humza went and resigned on us. But I never got around to publishing what had just been filmed on my phone. So I did publish it, and quite a lot of people have watched it. So I guess there still must be some interest in that. My frustration, though, is that I don't know, about 2,500 people have watched that. Whereas recently, I don't know what we've done to upset YouTube. Maybe I've said the wrong thing somewhere. I'm not sure. But I like views on YouTube are really low. So when we've been putting out things, this is our policy, or this is the important things we want to say, very few views. Put something on, basically a critique of Humza Yousaf, and that really attracts attention. But from the family party point of view, people might watch that. Will it make them think, yes, the family party I need to vote for? Or will they just think, oh yeah, Humza Yousaf, he's really awful, isn't it? I'm glad he's gone. So does that help us particularly? So our eternal challenge in the family party is the compromise between what gets views and what a lot of people want to watch, and the sort of thing we really want to be producing, and the things we think are the most important to say. So Phil, what's the answer?
Bring back Humza Yousaf, do you think?
Well, Humza Yousaf,
our views will go up again.
yeah. If we could have another leadership contest between Humza Yousaf and Kate Forbes, then we're in business. Fantastic. When Humza was First Minister, the hate speech legislation came in. That was the talk of the town, wasn't it? That was the hot topic, and we were in on it.
No talk of it anymore.
Yeah, and we had, we did the hate speech dinner party, so we got lots of views, lots of attention. And then, when there was the Kate Forbes, Humza Yousaf leadership contest, lots of attention with that, lots of views. Where's all the attention now? It's all on Keir Starmer, assisted suicide at Westminster, Donald Trump. So it's a bit more difficult for us to get the traction here in Scotland. Yeah. So Phil, what's the answer? What do we need to do? We can't bring Humza Yousaf back. It's not that. That's not worth it.
I think we just need to get out and bring our policies out on the streets.
Bypass
the doors
media.
And bypass the media, because I think we can only get so far by the algorithm, and we just need to grow our base.
Yeah. I feel as if increasingly I feel like online is dominated by sensationalism. Like there are other YouTube channels in Scotland, shall we say, who just, it's all the time. It's like shock, horror. This has happened. This has been uncovered. Scandal, conspiracy, shock, horror. This sensationalist sort of approach, and I'm sort of bored of it.
And now AI is doing much better at doing the shock horror headlines. Like you can see there are just all these videos which will take a subject, and somebody's asked, what would be the most shocking thing to happen in the world of gardening? What would be the most shocking thing to happen in the world of computing? What would be the most shocking thing to happen in, Scottish politics? And all these videos are kind of auto-generated with clickbaity titles. And so, I think there's a downfall of those kind of things.
Yeah. And having said that, I have been considering a John Swinney lecture. Now, at first thought, you might think John Swinney is much less controversial character.
I don't think it's going to sell out.
I don't know, though. Name, person, scheme?
Too long ago.
LGBT inclusive education. RSHP.Scott. He took part in the revival in the Scottish Parliament, quoting the Bible. So I was thinking of Swinney. I've got 2 out of the 3 things. They need to all begin with the same letter. We could have corrupter, obviously, corrupter of children. For Humza, I had Muslim. For John Swinney, I could have Christian, because he's talks about his Christian faith, reads the Bible at the prayer breakfast, etc., quotes the Bible in the Parliament. So I just need another thing beginning with C, and I could maybe be okay. But we think John Swinney wouldn't have the pull.
I don't think he's got the pull, and I don't think people know who he is. I'll have to look up on YouGov and see what Humza Yousaf's fame factor was.
That was UK wide, though, wasn't it? It
was UK wide, but it gives an idea of their the pull of their name. And I don't
Uh-huh.
think that, I think that Humza Yousaf might have achieved a higher notability than John Swinney. I have to check.
I mean, John Swinney hasn't even been condemned by Elon Musk, has he?
No, not yet.
No. Right, hello. So, right, evening, Carol. Let's move on. From the other thing we're thinking about in the new year, January, February, I think Neil and I are going to do our customary tour of the Highlands and Islands. Probably go to Kirkwall, maybe other places in Orkney, Western Isles as well, Inverness, Aberdeen. So we're up in those areas. One thing I'm thinking about doing in some of the places is a lecture on Scottish education called, let me try and get this right, Wet and Wild, Woke and Woolly. But we'll see. I don't really like using the word woke. I don't like to sound too much like the sort of GB News presenter. So it's not a word I normally use, but it's I couldn't resist it when
okay. Humza Yousaf fame factor is 62%.
Right.
Of people kind of know who he is in the UK.
Right.
John Swinney 45%.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Right. Moving on.
So and Humza Yousaf is more popular. Well, he's got a higher he's got a higher number that like him than Swinney, but only because more people know him. But his dislike factor is higher too.
I'm not sure I follow your logic there. More people like him because they know him.
Well, if you don't know somebody, then you can't. So it said like 16% think favourably of him, whereas Swinney only 10% think favourably of him. But that's only because so few people know him.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's the big vote on Friday, isn't it, for assisted suicide in England and Wales? I just think it's bizarre how quickly this has all happened, because in Scotland we've been waiting for years, and then suddenly Labour. We knew it was going to happen with Labour. Labour said, Keir Starmer said, we're going to make time for this, for this debate, for a bill to be brought forward. But it just seems to be really, really.
And you come into power, and you have a limited time to bring in the things which are on your agenda.
Yeah.
And so this is right on the top, isn't it? This is the after the budget, it's like number one priority.
I think their philosophy is, certainly the SNP did that, they would try and do this sort of thing early in the term of the Parliament. So they're going to have it, all people will be up in arms, they'll get sacks full of letters sent to them, but then it'll be over and done with, and by the time the election comes round, it'll be forgotten about. So I'm pretty sure that there's, like, Lucas's law is an operation in that controversial moral issues are dealt with early in the parliamentary term. Someone should do some research to see if that holds fast. I'm pretty confident of it with the SNP.
So you think moral issues will be done and dusted in the first year? Or do you think they'll go from bad to worse?
I think then they'll forget about them, and so will the voters. Many voters, obviously not people watching this, but a lot of voters will forget about them. Then by the time the next election comes around, they'll think, oh, it's just about the NHS and tax rates and schools and whatever. They'll have forgotten about all these crucial issues. My feeling, for what it's worth, is that this is going to pass. I think the mass of youngish Labour MPs are going to sway it. So I think I might be totally wrong, but my guess is it's going to pass. But what happens if it does pass is which party will make it their policy to repeal it? Well, I think basically English, Welsh, Scottish parties, basically none of them. I mean, the UK Lib Dems, I don't think it's even their policy to introduce it. It is in Scotland. It wasn't in the UK. But who will make it their policy to repeal it? Well, nobody. Reform certainly won't, because they're split down the middle, for and against it. And in any case, Richard Tice is actively campaigning in favour of assisted suicide. He says we should give it a try. That's an interesting approach to one of the gravest moral issues the Parliament's ever faced, isn't it? Let's give it a go, he says. Yeah, so on screen there, just a reminder that the UK government has a suicide prevention strategy, and at the same time, it's working out an assisted suicide bill as well. Look at the euphemisms. Again, terminally ill adults, end of life bill. They will not call it what it is. I think that's always a bad sign. If people won't call something what it really is, then that's a sign that they're embarrassed by it. They realize that expressing the true nature of it doesn't favor their cause, so they need to make up new language for it, which is obviously what's happening here. Which way do you think it's going? What do you feel in your bones, Phil? Do you think it'll pass or not?
I'm thinking, like, we were out when we did a questionnaire by Murray House, the teacher training college, and I'm just looking at the results we had from that, and that was 31 yes and 9 no, 7 maybes. Yeah. So yeah, I think on the kind of younger vote that people are going to be in favor of it, and yeah,
I can imagine with some MPs they might feel a little bit, well, I sort of don't know, I don't really care, but if I vote for it, that might be a black mark on my record. I would say if I was a Labour MP, if I was any sort of MP, and I had great ambitions and I didn't have any principles, I'd be thinking, I'm going to sit this one out. I'm going to abstain.
Yeah.
Because I want to be appealing to the whole electorate. So when I'm standing for party leader, when I'm trying to be prime minister, I don't want someone dragging up that I voted for or against assisted suicide. So I think the ones who abstain, it's a different number of them, will be the most ambitious ones, I would say. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. But not long to go. The last thing I'd say on this, I mean, I don't know how many letters the MPs are receiving, but I've never seen so much effort going into encouraging people to write letters to their MPs, which is sort of okay, especially on this issue, because they might be a bit more open-minded. But I just wish this same effort could go in at election campaign time, saying the Labour Party are going to bring this forward. So if you don't want this to happen, don't vote Labour. How much of that did you hear from all these campaigning groups? Well, virtually nothing. So they sort of take a holiday on election day and the election campaign. But then as soon as the government is in place, then you have to start writing letters to them. We're going to change what they think. And I don't think it really works out that way. Right. Okay. Let's move on. We'll come on to your thing in a minute, Phil. Right. With this sort of story, I'm finding them a bit. There's a constant string of ridiculous stories that come out. Well, it's more than ridiculous. Ridiculous is too light a word. Like of dangerous, harmful things related to transgender ideology. And what you're supposed to do on social media, you're supposed to pick up on the latest one and you use it and make a fuss about it and point out what's ridiculous. I just find out I'm sort of worn out doing that, because I'm just thinking that each issue isn't the main thing. We've got to get to the heart of the matter. But having said that, I'm going to do completely opposite now and just look at the latest issue. So this is a high school in Glasgow who were raising money to buy chest binders. I don't know who they're for. I mean, I assume maybe for pupils. I don't know. But in any case, raising money for chest binders. I mean, can you imagine that? A school deciding that there's a charitable activity, they're going to raise money for chest binders. I mean, one of the things wrong with this, one of the many, is that, like, for a school, you're going to raise some money. What about homeless people or like poor people in another country or something like that? In other words, a real mainstream charitable project. But it's quite routine now in schools that they're raising money for LGBT Youth Scotland so they can get their gold award, whatever. So a whole generation are being inducted into the idea that when you say charity, let's raise money for charity, they're thinking, oh, LGBT Youth Scotland, Scottish Trans Alliance, chest binders, etc. But are you surprised by that the school would be raising money?
Yeah, like I think it's a bit of a stretch to say that that's something that you need to raise money for. Like it assumes that people that need chest binders are poor or that they're incredibly expensive or something like that, and so yeah, why would a school be doing that? And presumably it's the parents. Like whenever a school's raising money for something, then it's the parents that have to pay for it. And so the children have to come home and explain to their parents that this is what the school's asking us to raise money for, you know.
That's a good point, actually. There's not a genuine need. The reason they're doing it is to push an ideology, is to communicate to the children that we think this is such a good cause, and trans people are in such need that they're top of our list. We're trying to do something to help them. So, right, I'll just delete our regular anti-Semitic commenter. Right, bye. Right, let's have a look what we've got. Right, some people have been asking about this in the comments. So here we are. We're obviously going on to this. A judgment hasn't been passed down, if that's the right term. And this is from the Daily Mail. SNP-led Scottish government. Why is it SNP-led? Just the anyway. Scottish government are set to argue for the rights of pregnant men and male-born lesbians at the UK's highest court tomorrow in landmark case about the definition of a woman. Now, their headline actually is pretty sensational. It doesn't actually get to the heart of what it's about. What it's about is whether or not the UK Equality Act should recognise real sex or pretend sex, like someone with a certificate from the government. That's what it's about. I would guess, if you're going to give someone a certificate, if the government is going to give someone a certificate saying, you are now a woman, this is official, legally, here it is, then I think it would probably be consistent to say, well, okay, if they're a woman, if we've given them a certificate saying they're a woman, then that probably means that they are. I just think this whole business, though, the fight is in the wrong place. The fight is over the manifestations and the practicalities, whereas the fight should be over the core issue, that they shouldn't be giving people certificates saying that they've changed sex. And then you can forget about all these peripheral issues. They'll all be solved in a stroke, and it's over. But anyway, that's the Scottish Family Party's unique contribution.
Yeah, I read through the BBC article on it, and the BBC seemed to say that the language of the gender certificate was that the person's sex had changed, and not that their gender had changed or something like that, So it was like, this person should be treated as this sex now, having had their sex legally changed, basically. So it actually seemed to be saying that the sex had changed legally. And so I thought, on that basis, if you were consistent, then, it would mean that biological men have the right to women's spaces. And as you say, the problem is with giving these certificates and with handing over this legal status to people, that is where the problem is.
Yeah, I was just trying to think of a parallel. I've just come up with this off the top of my head. I don't know if there's any use. Anyway, let's see. Let's say you had a system where you could self-identify as a doctor. So let's say I self-identified as a doctor, and I've got a stick for the government saying I'm now a doctor, and then I go and give on some medical advice about I don't know. Let's say a pregnant woman. I give her some medical advice about pregnancy, and prescribe some medication. And then people say, oh, no, you can't do that. You can't do that. But we need to change the law so that people who identify as doctors can't deal with pregnant women. And then I might go along and turn up at a car accident and try and deal with someone whose leg's smashed or whatever. Then they say, well, there's a problem. We need to change the law so that people who just identify as doctors, we don't want them dealing with broken legs. I could then try a bit of surgery on someone. They say, oh, no, we need to change the law. People who identify as doctors, they can't do surgery. You think, for goodness sake, is it not obvious? The problem is, I'm not a doctor, so I shouldn't have been given a piece of paper saying that I am. And that's what it feels like, and it goes round in circles. And although the rhetoric used is so strong, people speak about it so passionately, but won't get to the heart of the matter. I find it really strange.
Is the Scotland certificate different to the UK certificate? Is the wording different? Do you know?
No. Because the Scottish gender recognition reform never passed. It never came into force. So it's the same. So the UK one applies to the whole of Britain. I think the 2004 Gender Recognition Act is a classic case of something that needed opposing at the very beginning.
Yeah.
And it passed virtually without any controversy at all. It just slipped through. Oh, it'll just be a tiny number of people and you don't need to worry about it. But it was a really important thing. So that's where so 2004, who was the government? A Labour government, wasn't it? So 2004, when was the next election after that? Was it 2006? Can't remember. Anyway, so the next election, why were the Conservatives not saying, look what the Labour Party have done. This is ridiculous. They've said a man can become a woman. They've passed a law. This is nonsense. We're going to repeal that. Any chance of the Conservatives ever doing that? No chance. No chance. Reform Party, they're going to repeal it? No. Alba, no.
I mean, the Conservatives were arguing. They were arguing for the conversion therapy laws, and Johnson was humming and hawing as to whether it should include transgender identity or not. So he was nowhere close to repealing a law like this.
No. The 2021 Scottish election, every single MSP in the Scottish Parliament was elected on a manifesto of introducing a conversion therapy ban, including the Conservatives. It was in their manifesto to introduce a conversion therapy ban, which is just, I mean, to be fair, which I don't like to be too fair to the Conservatives, but just to be a little bit fair to them. I mean, back in the days of Theresa May and Boris Johnson, I mean, Ruth Davidson, oh dear, I mean, there's nothing remotely conservative about them. They were hardly Labour, but a bit slower. They were just Labour. But then with Rishi Sunak, and they became a little bit more conservative, maybe feeling the heat from reform. Kemi Badenoch, I think, is more conservative in some ways, but she's not a social conservative. But when it comes to the key questions that would distinguish a social conservative, no. She's much more mainstream. So, right. Let's get a few comments up. Well, we'll see. We'll see what the judgment says. Yeah, that's a nice phrase to bring into it, isn't it? We hold these truths to be self-evident. I mean, if it's not self-evident who's a man and who's a woman, then hard to know what is. Right, let's do one more. Then we'll go. Oh no, we'll leave that. Right, Phil. Let's go on to what you've got to talk about. Do you want to introduce it? And then we'll.
Yeah. So I thought this was actually more recent than it was, but it's from the beginning of Trump's campaign, and it's his view on what should happen with higher education. So this is from 2023, about a year ago, but as he's launching his presidential bid, kind of what he plans to do. I'm just going to bring this up. Oh.
Been horrified to see recent weeks. Americans have been horrified to see students and faculty at Harvard and other once respected universities expressing support for the savages and jihadists who attacked Israel. We spend more money on higher education than any other country, and yet they're turning our students into communists and terrorists and sympathizers of many, many different dimensions. We can't let this happen. It's time to offer something dramatically different. Under the plan I'm announcing today, we will take the billions and billions of dollars that we will collect by taxing, fining, and suing excessively large private university endowments, and we will then use that money to endow a new institution called the American Academy. Its mission will be to make a truly world-class education available to every American, free of charge, and do it without adding a single dime to the federal debt. This institution will gather an entire universe of the highest quality educational content covering the full spectrum of human knowledge and skills, and make that material available to every American citizen online for free. Whether you want lectures or ancient histories or an introduction to financial accounting or training in a skilled trade, the goal will be to deliver it and get it done properly. Using study groups, mentors, industry partnerships, and the latest breakthrough in computing, this will be a truly top-tier education option for the people. It will be strictly non-political, and there will be no wokeness or jihadism allowed. None of that's going to be allowed. Most importantly, the American Academy will compete directly with the existing and very costly four-year university system by granting students degree credentials that the U.S. government and all federal contractors will henceforth recognize. The Academy will award the full and complete equivalent of a bachelor's degree. In addition, to help the 40 million Americans who have some college education but no degree, the American Academy will grant credit for past coursework at legacy institutions and give you the chance to complete your education at the American Academy for free and much more quickly than is now possible or available. This will be a revolution in higher education and will provide life-changing opportunities for tens of millions of our citizens. Enjoy it, learn from it, and thank you.
So I was looking at just making a few evolutionary changes, let's say. So where do we start with that?
So yeah, I mean, it's something that I've thought for a long time, is that there's going to be some shake-up in the way education happens because of what we can do with computing. You know, that basically that we can have the best educators in the world producing courses. And it's really what I experience at work in my kind of field of expertise, like computing, is that people in computing are motivated to create educational content. And so as I work going along, people are writing frameworks, and the people that write these frameworks also write educational courses on them. And I'm learning as I go along, basically. And it's so much better than the material that I had at university, you know, in terms of actually learning things which are useful. And so I think there's a whole number of fields where this is more appropriate. This kind of education is more appropriate. Like there's obviously things like medicine and things like that, where you've got to work on real human beings. You need a lot of equipment and things like that, specialist equipment, which is there. And so there's a need for institutions for these kind of things. But then there's a whole lot of subjects where it's knowledge-based, or it's kind of technically based or something like that, something that you can do online. And I think it's a complete game changer to offer education on this basis, because for the price of a single institution, you can create a world-class resource, you know, that can educate the vast majority of a nation.
Okay, let's kind of come back on a few of those things. Is there like a medicine course? There's still obviously the theoretical and the knowledge bit. So that could be done differently. Maybe we'll end up with a stage where if you're going to do medicine, then maybe you I don't know. I was thinking your first year, you know, the first section of the course, you could have to go through a section and pass it.
Yeah.
Before you need any
driver theory test, you know, for learning to drive or something like that. Yeah, sure.
Well, maybe it could be that you do the theory in a sort of AI sort of context, and then you go to a local hospital for the there's all sorts of
and that part would be really cheap to educate people in, you know, the theoretical part of it, and that might help weed out the people that it wasn't worth spending money on to do the first year or something, you know, that once you've got the course there, you can put a lot of people through it.
So how about the interaction stage? How about the sitting in the student bar discussing philosophical questions?
Well,
when I was at university, people were just more thrown up over the carpet, but apparently it does happen in some university bars. This sort of intellectual community that people are going to be part of.
So they're saying that you can be a part of a cohort doing it. And that would be an online cohort. That, you know, like for the family party and lots of things we do, we meet online. My work now is mostly online. That you know, we have to go to the office 2 days a week, but when I go in, there's nobody else there, so I have to get through my work just by communicating with people. Some are in the States, some are in India, these kind of things, you know. And so I think for me, one of the big game changers there is what it means for family. You know, so there's the huge amount of debt that people have in the United States and the UK when they've been through university. A lot of that comes from accommodation and course fees and things like that. So if you bring down the price of the course fees and you don't need the accommodation, then that means young people aren't entering, you know, into their working lives having to pay off massive amounts of debt. I think that's a big change. It's a big change as well because they're not leaving their home city, and so you're getting these skills spread out across the country. It's bringing wealth to different areas. It's meaning people might likely marry somebody that they've grown up with, that they know, they've got a good reference on their character. So I think what we're seeing at the moment, because there's such a high number of international students, is that it's quite likely you go to university and you get married to somebody from a different country. Like I'm married to somebody from China, and that's part of a result of the way that universities work, in bringing people from different nations and things like that. And so, if you're bringing people together who are in their early 20s or whatever, or late 20s, then, that's quite likely going to be where the relationships start and things like that. So I think there are many things that might be kind of beneficial in terms of, I think as well that a lot of the promiscuity happens at university, and that's less likely to happen where people are staying with their parents and things like that.
So could you imagine then? So you've got 18-year-olds, they finish school, they're going to university. So first day at university, they're just up in their bedroom with their iPad. And they're sitting there for hours and hours every day.
I think what would happen, this is the way that I do things at work, is that, and one of the places I worked, we had something called guilds at our work, which was basically, we had half a day a week where we could study anything. And we had cohorts at work that would be interested in different areas of computing. And whoever wanted to teach people about something they'd learned could do that. And we would spend that half a day upskilling each other in different areas. And because technology is moving forward so quickly, we were always finding better solutions to things that we were actually working on, and we were learning the most relevant things. And so I think it's actually in companies' interests to be continually upskilling their workforce. And so I think you'd see far more things which are a bit more like sandwich courses, where people are going into the workforce, but also learning on the job, and you have excellent materials provided, for doing that.
Now that's a good question from Mark. I mean, this is the philosophy of the Open University, but turbocharged by technology, isn't it? Which makes the cost plummet, and accessibility is far better. The quality of education activity can be much more interactive. But it is basically the philosophy of the Open University, isn't it? But just in a different age.
I think what makes where I see this really working is in technology. That basically, if you create something new in technology, then it doesn't go anywhere unless you can educate people on why your thing is the best and why they should use it and how do you use it. And those are the kind of things that succeed. And so, I think if the world moves on to a system which is a bit more like that, where we're looking out for the best educators and the best thinkers, and we're distributing that knowledge very widely, there's just huge potential there. And then AI, like probably when Trump made this video, AI wasn't quite in the state it's in now. AI is incredibly good at disseminating information, because it can understand what you know and what your capabilities are, and it can take some. One thing you can do with AI is say, explain nuclear physics to me like I'm a 5-year-old or something like that, and it will take concepts that a 5-year-old understands and explain how nuclear physics works in a quite good way. And so there's that ability to take a field which is well understood, and then to kind of test you on it, see what your understanding is, and then fill in the gaps there. So it's a bit like having a very good tutor on that subject. So I think it's really changed the way education works.
Yeah. I find if I want to find out about something, now I'll go to an AI system, and you sort of have a conversation with it, and I ask exactly the question I've got. Whereas previously you'd be searching around to try and find it. But I ask exactly what I want to know, and normally it's pretty good. Well, quite a few comments here. Let's have a look at them. Right, hello, Mr. or Mrs. Prevails. Right, the young who are interested in good education can do so without let or hindrance. Yeah, I think that's really important. It takes away some potentially significant hurdles for people to get over to access that sort of education. I think it would also take away the idea that where you studied is more important than what you actually learned. I think that's sort of the situation in Britain. If you say, when I was at Cambridge, okay, you might have like got a third and scraped through your course by the skin of your teeth, but just by saying, when I lived in Cambridge, then that communicates to people. All right, we've got really. You went to Cambridge actually, didn't you? Did you?
Me? No. My dad went to Oxford.
Oh, okay, I mixed up.
Oxford Brookes, the Polytechnic.
But communicate. So people learn more from where you say you went to university rather than the grade you got. Now, to be honest, getting into Oxford and Cambridge is very difficult. And if you did go there, you're extremely intelligent, most likely. So I'm not saying it's like totally fictitious, but much better to give everyone a chance to get the same qualifications and to show what they can really do. I've got more comments here, right? Right, good question. How can we do this without increasing national debt? I think it's just so cheap to produce systems like this. Once you've designed it, whereas currently with courses, Professor Smith at Aberdeen University designs a course, a lecture series on such and such a thing, and then you've got Professor Jones at Glasgow, etc. But this is so scalable. It's much more efficient. So the cost would be virtually insignificant for a government to set up a central university that function like this, I would say. My reservation, though, is if you're centralizing the teaching, if you like, to the official government university, what happens if a government then starts trying to use that to its own end, starts to politicize that?
I don't think you have to centralize it. I think once you say that this is what we're doing, then anyone can sell courses into that. So once you've got a system in place and you say that we're accrediting learning in this way, then you open it up to lots of producers. And I think it's really important because for me, academia is often like 5 or 10 years behind in its teaching of where industry is. And I think industry will have a vested interest in producing learning materials that make people completely ready to join their industry.
Defund the woke university, transfer funding. Well, I think what Donald Trump's doing here is he's saying, basically, I'm just going to do whatever it takes. So if you're running a very prestigious university, he's basically saying to them, don't think that I'm afraid to really challenge you. Don't think that you're like untouchable, because I'm willing to really go to war with you.
I mean, he called them legacy institutions.
Yeah.
And that means he thinks the whole system is on the way out.
Yeah. Open universities had a reasonable success. I know a few people who have done open university degrees. They were very positive about it. I wonder how advanced they are now with their technology. That would be interesting. Access that interference or bias. Yeah, I mean, I think the bias in universities is a tricky one. In schools, you can just tell the teachers, and you can write the curriculum. When I was saying in school, like a critical thinking or a modern, critical thinking is a good example. I taught critical thinking at A level a while ago. And if I was in charge of that subject, I would say they cannot use any contemporary ethical or political issues in it. Because as soon as they do, they can't help themselves but to show examples of the fine reasoning of the left-wing progressive view and the flaws in the argument of the conservative positions. They can't help themselves. So the way around that would be to say you've got no contemporary applications at all. But with universities, part of what a university is you've got the academics who are free to pursue their interests and their own thinking. So what do you do about that to try and prevent bias? I mean, if you've got 10 history professors and they're all like left-wing extremists, what do you do? Do you try and measure that and get rid of half of them and bring in more right-wing ones, or tell them they can't present their values? Family party policy, by the way, is that you need to make sure pupils hear the other viewpoints. Even if you're bringing someone in as a visiting lecturer once in a while, you've got to take steps to make sure that the pupils hear alternative viewpoints. So, what's the solution to that, do you think?
I think that probably comes down to debate, doesn't it? That's the where debate comes in is that you have two opposing viewpoints, and you have representatives from each.
But what if they're not there, though? How does someone measure that and say, right, we've got a problem here, we need to do something about it?
Like I think what you've had it like in terms of the election in the United States is that it was pretty close to 50-50 on both sides. There were half the population who were going one way, half the population going another. And so I guess if there's things that you can vote on and you can see if people are happy or not with something, you can work out what the two positions are, that need to be argued from.
I think at university, the professors got such prestige and they're at such an advantage over their students. I did a course. I took a sabbatical year. Where are we now? I don't know, 14 years ago. And I went to some lectures at Sheffield. I went to Sheffield University, basically, and went to philosophy lectures. And quite often I'd be thinking I disagree with what this book's saying. I would make it my mission to put my hand up and try and say something that like stopped them in their tracks and showed that it didn't make sense, and for them to think, oh, right, okay, don't know what to say there. In the whole of the year, I maybe achieved that about twice. All the other times, I would come forward with my counterpoint, but they'd heard it all before. That they'd got an answer, and then they move on. Obviously, they're not going to have a backwards and forwards. They've got an answer, and things move on. And that was me as however old I was, 40-year-old or whatever, however old I was then. So yes, I think they've got such power over very young people who are in awe of the academics learning, and are not so obviously not so educated in putting forward the other points of view.
No, but I think like in today's situation, you'd say you've got the woke colleges putting forward one point of view. You've got, say, Jordan Peterson putting forward the opposite. So you knew if you were going to choose the best speakers on each side, I think you might maybe struggle more to find the prominent speaker on the left you put on the right. Yeah.
But again, a lot of questions there. Who decides? Who picks these people? So it's difficult to pin down, I think. But maybe, just if you've got more variety and let the students choose I don't know. Home education online, I think there's massive potential for that. I think there already is. There are already really good online courses. When people say, I'm homeschooling, I normally imagine like mum sitting with 4 kids and she's trying to teach one of them higher maths and another one's trying to write a story, another one's colouring a colouring book or something. But often there's nothing like that. They're doing online courses and it's very structured, and the parents are paid for the children to sign on to an online course that's assessed, and they're given work. They've maybe got an online tutor. But again, with AI, that could be turbocharged as well. So it's a similar sort of thing, actually. So as well as going to university becoming not as necessary, going to school will become less necessary as well.
I think the places that you're really going to see this explode is obviously countries that don't have good schooling systems, that don't have Scotland. The infrastructure there and everywhere. I think that we do, and that's the problem. And there would be other nations which are craving, educational resources, and everyone's got mobile phones or some sort of computer equipment. And, another thing is that AI enables is translation of material into other languages. And so it only takes one country to do this well, one place in the world to do it well. Yeah. And it can be automatically translated into other languages and things like that. And so I think we're going to see, just educational resources flooding around the world. And there will be some that will be known to be very good, and that there may be international bodies that can bring some sort of control on it and force us all to I would like to. The thing is, though, these big lumbering giant organizations like the UN or whatever, they'll probably say, "Oh, we're going to produce the world education," but it won't be as good.
as the ones other people will make, the ones that private companies make or other organizations.
I mean, so Elon Musk has opted out of the United States education system, and he's got his own school, which he has for his numerous kids. He's got enough kids to have a school, you know, and he's bound to put some of that stuff online. He's bound to think, well, you know, now I'm actually in a position I can change how education works. And I think having those technical thinkers in the Trump administration, you know, will make a difference as well as to whether this would be successful, because you need to be good at technology to make it happen, you know.
Yeah. Quick reminder of how many MSPs have got a maths, technical engineering, science background. I think the answer is 0.
Yeah.
Right. The powers that be will always want to influence education from an ideological point of view. I agree. But if it becomes diversified, though, if there's huge pluralization of it. So if it's to the point where, for example, if you want to learn something, you can just pick the course from anywhere in the world. I guess you still need standardization of qualifications to some degree, don't you?
I think you want that probably at the very basic level of things, you know. But after a bit, you want people to be exploring the frontiers on lots of niche subjects. So one of the problems with our education system, it churns out lots of clones, you know, where people all know the same stuff. Whereas what we want more is that there's so many fields of knowledge. We want people on the forefront of all of those fields of knowledge.
Yeah, yeah. That's a good point. Assessment. But at the moment, schools, you either have to write it by hand, or if you're going to use a computer, you go into the exam hall and they provide a computer for you. That's not on the internet, and there's no possibility of cheating. So
I think AI can interview you on a subject. You know one of the kind of things for learning from AI is basically the AI, as you're going along, should be assessing what you know, and it should be explaining concepts you don't know in terms of concepts that you do know. And so I think any AI that had been working with you to kind of teach you material would also be able to assess your competency at it without you even needing to sit a test. It would say, I'm confident that Phil can do this, or he can't do that, you know.
Yeah. Well, the hour is up. That was extremely interesting. Thank you for your comments, everyone. We managed to bring quite a few of them on, so that's given me plenty to think about. I like it when I learn things on the live stream or anywhere else for that matter. So thanks very much. The
problem is that the AI could probably just say, I could do it myself. But, yeah.
Another reminder, if you get to Edinburgh on Thursday evening, it'd be great to see you at Convocation. So do come along if you can. And we will say good night and see you next week. Right, thanks for watching. Good night.
Good night.